Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so glad that you could be here with us, and we are so excited to be a part of the Good Tech Fest community today. We've got a lot of information to get through, so we'll go through at a pretty good clip. But just to orient you to the talk, the first thing we're going to do is introduce you to the Health Worker Data Alliance as an initiative, tell you a little bit about how we came to be in our group. We'll talk about how we have framed the problem and how we are framing our sort of customized solution. Then we'll pop in and look at the output of all the data we're collecting to understand our data visualization. And then for the nerds in the crowd, we'll pop into survey optimization, our app and data pipeline, and let you guys kind of geek out for a bit. And then zoom out and talk about why this initiative matters. And then we should have about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. But before we do all of that, I'd first like to just do a quick round of introductions. So my name is Maria Demopoulos. I'm the project director of the Health Worker Data Alliance. In my day job, I'm the founder of the Advisors, which is a philanthropic consulting firm. And in another life, I ran a global NGO that partnered with academic medical institutions in the United States and in Ethiopia to build in-country capacity for outcomes research and surgical training in Ethiopia. So that's how I come to you today. I'm joined by a great panel of brilliant women, and we'll go through one by one and do a round of introductions. So Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm a postdoc fellow in the Department of Epidemiology of Microbial Diseases at the Yale School of Public Health. I typically work in vaccine preventable disease, but there's no vaccine for COVID yet.
I'm Monica, and I am a software engineer at 8th Light.
Hi, I'm Francesca Sadikin, and I'm also an engineer at 8th Light.
So that's the team who you'll be hearing from today. So we are an initiative of practitioners and volunteers who started about 1 month ago to collect actionable data in support of health workers nationally and really wherever we can reach them, so across the country. We started 1 month ago, and we now have users in 20 states, as well as in Canada and Mexico, which is great news, and it's been a whirlwind of a month. But none of that would be possible without the support of our partners. So we are especially indebted to the Robert R. McCormick Foundation for their seed and startup funding. All of this goes towards project cost and maintenance so that everything that we build can be free to hospital administrators, to policymakers, and to any end user. We're also grateful to Mount Sinai Health Group and Mount Sinai in Chicago's Family Medicine Department in particular, and to the COVID Statistics, Policy Modeling, and Epidemiology Collective. In particular, we are grateful to our members from Yale and from University of Chicago, so thank you guys. And to 8th Light. 8th Light is a software development firm who has very generously donated not just 2 full-time software engineers pro bono to work on this project, but also a part-time project manager who is always one step ahead of us and has been fantastic partners from day one. And last but not at all least, we are indebted to Amelia Coe and Data Viz for nonprofits. So you're going to see a lot of really beautiful data visualizations and Tableau. All of that has been done by Amelia, and we are grateful to all of our partners. So that's sort of where we are now and the partners we've developed so far. But to understand the initiative, it's helpful to kind of look back at how we started. So this is a photo of my sister and I. My sister is in the black gown, I'm in the red. And my sister and I graduated college on the same day that my sister graduated from medical school. So my sister is a physician at a hospital here in Chicago. And as you know, in April, when we started to see the first kind of wave of COVID hit Italy, we started to hear stories coming out about health workers who were seeing a few different things. They were watching their peers and their colleagues become their patients. They were watching their friends and colleagues come into work day after day with inadequate PPE, that's personal protective equipment. And they were watching as they at times became sick and died in isolation. And it doesn't take a lot of thinking as a sister or a family member to start doing the math and wonder, you know, how long is this going to go on? How long is my sister going to have to be in the hospital? Will she have adequate PPE? Will she become sick? And what can we do about it? So at first I assumed that certainly we must be tracking the experiences of health workers. You know, surely there must be data around their mental health, their physical health, and kind of what's going on with their access to PPE or their occupational health. So I started to look around, and over time I realized that, in fact, we are not doing that adequately, and more could be done. So I did what any kind of concerned sister would do. I reached out to everybody I knew to ask them kind of what we can do to help. The first folks that I reached out to were practitioners themselves. So I reached out to several physicians. We contacted nurses and epidemiologists to ask them what would be most useful and what kind of tool would be most actionable. So we wanted to build something that was practitioner informed and not just build a tool for the sake of building a tool. That was our kind of primary purpose. And it turned out that we also contacted, folks on the legal side, on the graphic design and UX UI team. We have several, world-class evaluators and a great communications team who help us get the word out. So it turns out that there were lots of volunteers and lots of practitioners who wanted to answer the call to be useful in a time of need and who also cared about health workers. So that's our team and how we work together. On this call today, you'll see there are 4 of us speaking, but at any given time, there are between 15 and 25 folks working kind of around the clock on the Health Worker Data Alliance. So we are grateful to them and indebted to them, and they are all part of a team that makes this come together. So that's who we are and how we came together. And I want to talk a little bit about how we started to arrive to certainty and clarity around what specific problems we were trying to address and how we could build solutions that would answer those. So in those early days, we had a lot of information coming in about COVID and not a lot of certainty or data coming out. As one person put it, we are in a data-free zone. So our first challenge was to really narrow down and understand what specifically we could tackle. And we identified 3 distinct issues. The first is exposure. So we know that health workers are 3 times more likely than any member of the public to contract COVID-19. We also know that they will have the most prolonged and significant exposure rate, and that will continue to be true long after the first surge kind of recedes. So as the country starts to reopen and starts to experiment with different policies around how to re-engage with the economy, we know with certainty that health workers are going to continue to be exposed to COVID. And we also know that our health workforce is finite. So while we don't mean to make light of the capacity constraints around producing PPE or masks, it is much harder to make a new physician or nurse than it is to make a new mask or a new gown, and it takes much longer. So that was the first issue we're trying to tackle. Second is around recognition. So hospitals and hospital administrators, in the rush to respond to COVID as it originally hit our shores, understandably dedicated their efforts to becoming nimble and efficient in preparing their facilities and their staff to combat COVID-19. We've also seen a wellspring of sort of crowdsourced initiatives to collect and understand data around the patient population. So whether it's contact tracing or whether it's building tools to help people diagnose and understand their symptoms, there have been great efforts toward that. In this rush, we posit, and now we understand, that health workers, sort of our most vulnerable and finite asset, have been a little bit overlooked, and more can and must be done, specifically looking at that workforce to track and understand their experiences so that we can build better policies and practices to support them. And the third thing is the response. So certainly hospitals are doing their absolute best, and all health centers are doing their absolute best to support their workforce, taking their temperatures and all kinds of different policies. But much of that information was staying within a single institution and was disjointed across institutions, across areas, within a single state, and certainly across states. So one of the things we wanted to do was try to figure out how can we get information that's usable at a higher aggregated level, so perhaps the metropolitan statistical area, which is sort of like a citywide area, that's open and usable to the public. So that's the problem that those are the 3 problems that we tried to solve. And we tried to solve that. With this, as we started shaping a solution, we figured out that there were sort of, again, 3 significant areas that we could track to try to respond to this. The first is the physical health of health workers. So looking at their symptom clusters as they change throughout times, so we could see, it's not that insightful to say health workers are going to become sick. It is perhaps more helpful to be able to say how and when they're going to become sick, for how long they're going to be sick, and what cluster patterns are emerging across which specific demographic groups. The second is their mental health. We've heard a lot about how the trauma that health workers are facing on their jobs is sort of the next major epidemic that we're facing in the United States. So if we can understand and collect the frequency and intensity of their moods and kind of track that, we can then better support them. And the third thing is occupational health. So, there was a lot of rush to kind of respond as quickly as possible to COVID-19, and folks had across institutions different policies around personal protective equipment usage and different policies around quarantine time. So our idea was if we could create a place to share that information across institutions, that would be really helpful and useful. And in framing through how sort of to build collect these three areas of data, we knew that we had to have kind of another set of information in mind. And that was that, one, we wanted to consider everyone who worked in a hospital or healthcare setting. So not just your physicians and your nurses, not just your PAs, but also, your ancillary staff, your janitorial staff, your food services staff, all of the people who are required and essential to make a hospital run. We wanted to include them. Second, we wanted to maintain the balance and confidentiality of kind of two different sets of constituents. On the one hand, we want to create a safe and secure place for individual participants who are working in a hospital to share their stories and to understand and to know that this is an independent initiative and to know that their responses will be confidential and cannot be identified at the individual level. And then at the institutional level, we need to have a space that is safe for individual institutions to know that they won't be identified at the institutional level. They can only be data is aggregated and can only be identified at the metropolitan statistical area, state, or national kind of region or level. And the last thing that we realized was that this needed to be done yesterday. So every day counts. The most actionable data is the data that we're collecting in real time. So that was the task ahead of us. And to respond to this need, we decided that we would kind of do a phase rollout. And I will let Monica and Francesca, our software engineers, talk about in detail sort of the phase 2 rollout. I'll just talk quickly about phase 1. So we decided that we wanted to do something really simple and really quick. So we built a survey using SurveyMonkey, which many of you guys have probably used, a survey and a website. The benefits of this is that a survey can be texted out weekly to audiences. It's very low touch. We know health workers are exhausted and don't have a lot of time at the end of the day. And we could have a website that was live that we built in a matter of, I think, 2 weeks or 1 week. So everyone could see the data that we're collecting and interact with it pretty quickly. So that was sort of the phase 1 build out. And phase 2 and phase 3, I'm putting up there now, but we can talk about it with our software engineers as we move through. The way that the survey works has a few different benefits. One, as we said, we're using SurveyMonkey, so there are no barriers to scale. The survey is live. Any health worker can take it. If you know health workers, we ask you to encourage them to participate. You can find it at healthworkerdata.org/survey. And the survey is practitioner informed, and it is safe, secure, and HIPAA compliant. One of the accidental boons of this initiative is that because we went with a survey and we don't ever collect information from HIPAA-covered entities, we don't require any kind of administrative integration with any hospital systems, and there's no administrative burden to participate. So we kind of found, we threaded the needle of collecting data securely without imposing any kind of administrative burden. Of course, this will always be free to participants. This is not a for-profit initiative. This is very much intended to be free and available to anyone who wishes to participate, who is a health worker. The survey is shared out across 2 different ways. The first is any health worker can elect to participate. As I just said a few moments ago, you can access the survey on our website. Or an individual hospital administrator can elect to share out a simple survey link with their entire workforce. After that, that's one click, they're hands off. We can send a weekly reminder via text to participants to take an amended survey, which takes about 4 minutes. And that enables us to track folks longitudinally over time, which is great. So we get much richer and much more granular data. And then kind of at the output side, data is aggregated and anonymized and shared back in one of 2 different formats. The first is tailored for the public. So that's public facing for any policymakers or thought leaders who want to access this and see what's going on. Those will be available on our website. For those, we're going to hop into visualizations in a moment, but for those, you can only access and filter down to the metropolitan statistical area. So you can see what's happening from region to region, but not identify individual participants or individual institutions. Conversely, for any individual institution who elects to participate, they can access a password-protected portion of our website where they can log in and see data that looks specifically at their institution. Importantly, they still cannot identify individual participants. They can only see in aggregate what's happening in their workforce. One important note here is that, as you can tell, it's really useful for us to have greater participation rates from an individual institution. So we can tell what's going on in the story of your workforce in your specific institution if a healthcare administrator texts out the link to their entire workforce. We get much more granular data than if individual participants log in kind of one by one. So that's perhaps how we can get the most richest and actionable data. So that's sort of what we have and how it works. Now I'd like to walk you through our data visualizations. So we're going to hop in for just a moment, and in just one moment we're going to hop into a demo, but I wanted to take a moment and thank Data Viz for Nonprofits and Amelia Combe, who have built all of this. So as you'll see in a moment, the dashboards have two different sides. On the sort of, for me, the left side, the map, the heat map, you can see the geographic display of where participants are coming from. And on the right-hand side, you can see a bunch of different data that's filterable. And when you interact with the data, both of these sides are going to change. So I'll walk you through a quick example of what we're building. So here you can see at the top, there are a bunch of different categories of dashboards. We don't have time to get into all of them, so we thought we'd give you one. This looks at demographics. As you can see, we can filter through to see where specifically we want to look. This one selects the Chicago-Naperville metropolitan statistical area. And then you can look to filter participants, not just by race, by ethnicity, gender, or other demographic characteristics, but also by where they work and in what field they work in the hospital, because we know that they face different exposure rates. One more quick example is our COVID policy dash. So this dashboard displays two things. On the left, we ask people about their current PPE policy, and you can track this week to week to see as these PPE policies are changing. So some people are required to quarantine, your quarantine policy, not your PPE policy. Some quarantine policies are stay at home for 72 hours until you're asymptomatic, and some quarantine policies are stay at home for 14 days. This is going to change as institutions experience surges. That makes sense. On the right-hand side, what you can see is how people are staying home, and that's disaggregated by the reason they're staying at home. So we can see kind of alongside one another how policies are playing out through institutions. And on the right-hand side, as I look at the screen, the kind of blue and green side of the screen, we can see if people are staying home because they have positive exposure and a confirmed test to COVID, or if they just have exposure, if they're practicing telemedicine. So we can disaggregate it in a really important way. And we can also track users who respond a single time or multiple repeat longitudinal participants, which is really great. So that's the sneak peek of our data visualization. So we have our product, we have our team, and our survey. The next challenge for us was, how do we get exhausted health workers to give us 4 minutes of their day, week after week, to participate? And to that, I'll turn it over to Stephanie, one of our epidemiologists, to talk about survey optimization.
All right, so let's discuss the basic idea of a survey. What are we trying to do here? We want to ask questions, get answers, and then do something with those answers. So let's start with the first step and ask a question, a nice, straightforward one. How do you feel? Now, you can imagine a free text response to this question might have a variety of answers. We might get one-word answers, fine, tired, hungry. We might get silly answers, IDK, LOL, and we might get really lengthy answers that are hard to parse. Pretty good, except my ankle itches, and since I went outside because I think it's a high pollen day and I'm so sensitive to ragweed and pine trees. Sorting through this mess to get actual answers and do something is going to be tricky. So part of the problem is that these 3 steps are all relying on the success of the first step. A more realistic way to look at the problem is, how do you feel? How do we ask this question so that we get answers, so that we can do something? The question that we're asking is not just, oh, hey, how you doing? We need a response that goes a little deeper than knee-jerk politeness. We want to know if workers are coping with the demands that are placed on them, if they're feeling safe, if they're experiencing trauma. These things aren't what we're primed to answer when we're asked the question, how do you feel? So what do we need to ask instead? It's not really one question, but a system of questions, something that's been validated in previous studies. This particular set of questions was validated as being able to detect post-traumatic stress disorder, which is one of our main concerns when we talk about mental health during the pandemic. The really great thing about this set of questions is that it's adaptable without losing sensitivity. So instead of asking 14 questions, we can use a subset, a 6-question version of this question, which fits all of the questions onto one page and saves time for our workers. And best of all, we can use these answers to establish something. We can decide if the risk of PTSD seems to be related to other hot topics like shortages of PPE, and we can use this data practically to encourage our administrators to reevaluate their workers' needs in terms of scheduling shifts and having available mental health resources. And our survey isn't just addressing mental health. We can also address workers' needs in a lot of different areas, like their actual supplies with PPE, where we can help identify shortages or inefficiencies in their programs. We can also answer process engineering questions, like comparing the success of different quarantine policies. Is it best for workers to isolate themselves for 14 days? Is there any benefit to reducing this time to 10 days? Does this actually increase the risk of infection? We've developed a tool here that is highly flexible, intentional, and centered on tracking and improving the conditions for our health workers.
I muted myself. Thank you, Stephanie. That was fantastic. So we understood that we had the survey live. We had a great group of physicians, nurses, and epidemiologists who help us optimize the survey to ask exactly the right questions and capture as much data as we could with as few questions as possible. Then we started to wonder, what are the limitations around SurveyMonkey? It's a fantastic tool. We're really grateful to SurveyMonkey, but there are a few different things that made it difficult at input to then clean and kind of standardize data at output. So we were really fantastically lucky that we were put in touch with 8thLight. 8thLight is a software engineering firm who reached out and got in touch with us and have been phenomenal leaders on a few different fronts. One, I think as just business and community leaders, for them to have recognized the need as the nation faces COVID-19 and to step up has been fantastic. And then two, as I said before, to donate 2 software engineers and a project manager has been fantastic. But not just that, they've also just sort of been one step ahead of us, knowing that we're a volunteer-run organization, and helped us think through what our next steps are. So to speak a little bit more about that, I'll turn it over to Monica and Francesca, our software engineers.
Thank you. Okay, hi, I'm Monica.
And I'm Francesca.
We are both software engineers, although we do call ourselves crafters at 8thLight. We're thrilled to be a part of this team, and we are really lucky that we get to work on this full time. Today, we're going to talk through our process. We will zoom in on a couple of decision points, and then we're going to show off what we are building.
So to help the initiative get actionable data for health workers, we at 8thLight have a process to ensure we're going to make the right steps to get us closest to this goal. The core of our process is questions and identifications. We ask questions about the problem, identify priorities and any gaps missed, and then investigate time and cost trade-offs of different solutions to help our team make the best informed choice. And for the specific project, we also wanted to provide detailed roadmaps and extensive documentation on all of our research and choices. This is especially important knowing that this team is run on an all volunteer team. So we want to be able to transition knowledge very quickly to keep the project moving if we were pulled off suddenly.
Okay, the first decision that we had to make counterintuitively was, should we build anything? Do we actually need to leave SurveyMonkey to get the things that we want? Is writing custom software even the right lever to pull to get this data? So we did a bit of research. There were a few advantages on SurveyMonkey, which we had to take into account. If you have never run a survey there yourself, there's actually quite a bit of cool things built in. So first of all, there was a minimum viable product that already existed and was up and running. It's a survey, people can take it, we can access the data, and it's in a format that Tableau can use. There's some built-in tech support and customization without any code, a guided user interface, some basic analytics, skip logic. It also manages and hides the data pipeline so that the owner of the survey doesn't have to worry about how what leaves a user's fingers makes it ultimately into the nice CSV that Tableau consumes. And finally, cost. It wasn't quite free, but the costs were definitely manageable. But on the other hand, there were some frictions on things that were very important to us. So first of all, the user experience was clunky. It was not mobile first, and repeat users of the survey had to re-enter all of their profile information every time they completed the survey. Not great. Second, customization was limited, which usually we could work with, but in this case, we had certain questions where our outcome was just unacceptable. Data validation for hospitals was absolutely one of those instances. SurveyMonkey caps the number of items that you can upload into a drop-down menu. In this case, what that means is that our options were, we could enter free-form responses into the hospital question and then play a fun guessing game about which university hospital our user was trying to tell us about. Or we could make 50 versions of the hospital question, one for every state, and then have users scroll alphabetically through every hospital in the state. Neither of those works for us. Definitely untenable. And finally, reminders. We wanted to run text reminders to make sure that users were coming back and giving us that longitudinal data that we wanted. In SurveyMonkey, we knew we would need to run those in a separate service, but in a custom form, we had the possibility of maybe getting out of a paid separate service and running them on our own. So we looked at these trade-offs, we thought about our priorities, and we had made a decision. First of all, we need accurate data. Hospital validation is absolutely crucial to our initiative and to the accuracy of the data we're trying to gather. Second, we need a lot of data. We need to make it really easy to take the survey, even easier for repeat users. And that means we need to meet health workers where they are. It needs to be fast and definitely mobile first, excuse me. At this point, we've listened, we've researched, and we are satisfied. A custom form is the best lever we can pull to get this data, and we will figure out how to do that on a shoestring budget. So with that, we said farewell to our good friend SurveyMonkey, and we were on our way.
So the next choice we had to make was actually determine the product type that will help us get to the goals the quickest. Are we going to build a mobile app, a website, or maybe a combination of both? To help guide this decision, we took a look at the most important features in the MVP and did a cross comparison of each product type's ability to implement that feature and look at any associated costs. So first, we wanted to make sure that repeat users are going to be able to skip basic questions to reduce the completion time. As we mentioned before, we want our survey to be taken multiple times, and we want to lower any obstacles that may prevent them from doing so. For this particular feature, each product type was able to implement it at no additional cost. Great. The second feature is notifications. We want to be able to remind our users to retake the survey every 7 days. Implementation-wise, there are two ways to do it. There's text notifications that are going to be accessible to all users on their phone, but at a cost, especially as the initiative grows, and push notifications, which are virtually free, but only available for users who have downloaded the app. Considering our team is a volunteer group, cost is a concern, and that's how we framed our comparison. So on the left, a website would be able to utilize text notifications to reach a wider audience, but at a higher operating cost. On the other hand, a mobile application would be able to keep our costs low, but it also reduces our user pool. A combination of both a web app and a mobile app would be able to average out the cost and reach the widest user pool. And third, we wanted to look at the product type's user access. So just who would be able to fill out the survey on each of these product types. A website would be able to have the largest user group because anyone with access to the internet would be able to submit the form. On the other hand, mobile would be the most restrictive and cumbersome. So a user would have to go to the App Store, download the app, open the app before they can even start the survey process. But if we can get users past this point, we could possibly see higher user engagement. Having both the website and mobile would seem like a good compromise in that the website would be able to capture the most users and the mobile would be able to see higher user engagement. So after some consideration with our team, it might not be a surprise to you that we decided to build the combination of a web app and mobile. Specifically, we would first build the website so that we can capture the largest user pool, and then build the mobile application so that we can start leveraging the lower cost of the push notifications as well as start to see higher user engagement. So now I'm going to pass it to Monica, who will show a sneak peek of our web app.
Okay, so sneak peek. This is a mobile-first web app. It's written in React, and it features some gorgeous design work from our friends at IA Collaborative. As a reminder, our priorities for building this custom form were 1, great user experience, 2, some improvements for repeat users, and 3, as much front-end data validation as possible. Okay, so first, mobile-first design. On the left, we have the SurveyMonkey version of the profile questions. You can see it's not exactly mobile first, and all of the profile questions are on the same page, which if you're just starting the survey feels like a lot to fill out, and definitely we know would be annoying to fill out every time that you're coming back to that survey. On the right, we have our version of our homepage. It is mobile friendly. We've got big finger-friendly buttons and some nice graphics. And as you'll see here, we've made some improvements to make it a little easier to use. We've taken advantage of some native features like a keyboard, a numbers-only keyboard, and we are able to have a little progress bar at the top, which kind of helps you feel like you're speeding through the profile section a little bit faster. Our second major improvement is that not only is it mobile friendly, but repeat users can actually skip the profile section entirely. We're able to do this without a user management system or any kind of login by storing a user's previous answers locally on their own device. So when a user starts the survey, we simply check their local storage to see if they've already provided profile information, and if they have, we skip them ahead to the next section. As an additional improvement for repeat users, we also pre-fill prior responses for questions we have to ask every week. So these are questions like, are you currently living separately from your family due to fear of workplace exposure? Or are you currently working within your trained scope of practice? We do not pre-fill responses for any questions about symptoms or experiences because we know that would bias our responses. Next, here's what our hospital validation question looks like now. So in this happy path, the user enters their workplace's zip code, it filters the hospitals in the United States, pops up their hospital, they can select it immediately. But in the second version, they enter the wrong zip code. They don't get it popped up to the top because there's no hospitals in that zip code, but they can still use this search bar to search through all of the hospitals and find their result. We did seed this dropdown with every hospital in the United States according to the United States government, but on the off chance that somebody can't find their hospital for whatever reason, there is an option to enter it manually as well. Here is a custom React component we built to help people enter a lot of information very quickly. So as you can see here, when we're gathering data about symptoms, we're able to use that validated scale so that we're getting consistent information week over week about the same set of symptoms. And we also have some flex for users to enter extra information free form. And last but not least, the last feature that we wanted to add was support for multiple languages. This was really important to the initiative because we absolutely want to gather the experiences of hospital workers and healthcare workers whose first language is not English. However, as an all-volunteer team, we also wanted to make really sure that those translations could be managed by non-programmers. So all the text you see on the screen of the app is stored separately from the rest of the application, and additional language files can be added at any time. The survey detects the browser's default language to determine which text to display, and then it stores their users' responses in English for analysis by our English-speaking data team. We also have checks built into our deployment to make sure that it's impossible to add a translation file that has missing fields before a survey goes live.
All right, so we saw our beautiful custom survey, but that's not the end of our work. Now we have to figure out how to get all of these form results into Tableau, where it can then be used to generate the data visualizations. That seems simple enough, right? But it's actually more complex than you might expect. For this initiative, our data pipeline needs to accomplish a few things. We need to secure our data, automate the pipeline process so it can continue running when we are gone. The team needs to have the ability to make minor adjustments to the pipeline without directly manipulating code. And most importantly, it needs to scale as this project grows without breaking the bank. So this is a high-level overview of our entire pipeline in AWS. For some of you, this next part is going to be interesting, but probably for the rest of you, it's going to be a little dry. At the very least, I'm hoping that it's enlightening to see what's behind the scenes of a custom solution. So let's start to break this down. When we first contemplated our data pipeline, we first made sure to talk to our team to see if they had any preferences for a tool. Our data analysts who are creating the data visualizations in Tableau spoke of a service called AWS Athena as a possible data source for Tableau. After some research, we decided that this particular flow of Athena to Tableau was going to be the anchor of our data pipeline because it actually helps us solve the problem of automating the process of sending data to Tableau. So with this, our data analysts would literally be able to click a button in Tableau to fetch new data when they need it. From here, we worked backwards to figure out the rest of the pieces we needed for our pipeline. So at the front of our pipeline, we still need to figure out how to get all of our data from our custom survey into AWS. Our priorities are to save costs for the client and ensure flexibility if the survey data shape changes. So based on Athena best practices, Parquet was chosen as a data format because it offered better file size compression, which directly impacts costs for our clients, and better data shape flexibility as opposed to JSON or CSV. We also use AWS Athena and AWS Glue to build a relational data structure based off these S3 files. To prepare these S3 files, we ended up choosing AWS Kinesis Firehose to handle the incoming data because of its scalability and, most importantly, its built-in way to transform JSON into Parquet. Now here is the tail end of the pipeline as shown before, but with the addition of the S3 folders and its integration with AWS Glue and Athena. So that's the pipeline from our survey to Tableau, but we're not done yet. Let's not forget that we wanted to have text notifications, and that doesn't just happen. So here we need to set up a pipeline to consolidate these phone numbers from our custom survey into a CSV file, which we can then send to our team so that they can then integrate with Twilio to finally send out these weekly text notifications. Now we are done. So as you can see, what seemed like a very simple task actually has quite a few steps in between to really prepare our data for Tableau. So let's take a look at the cost of all of these services. Here's our estimated yearly budget for the project. So given 100,000 submissions per week with a daily pipeline refresh, we're looking at around $100 for the first year. First impressions, that's seems pretty cheap for all of the work we're doing, but it's important to note that this didn't just happen. We very carefully considered the group's budget and made sure to implement best practices and chose the right AWS services to help control the costs for this group.
Okay, so to close this out of the technical segment, I'm going to recap why this solution is a good fit for our initiative. If you're sitting out there thinking that maybe custom software might be a good fit for your initiative, here's a few things you might think about before you head down that path. So we are really proud of what we're building because, one, it's aligned with our priorities and values. The key features that we're investing time in building matter to our end users. They are going to help us get that actionable data from health workers. Two, we had time to implement this solution. Because we have an MVP version up already, we can afford to wait a few weeks that it may take to have that custom version live. Third, we have a data pipeline that we know is going to work. By working backwards from the final format we'll need the data in, we built a scalable, automated, low-cost data pipeline that anybody can manage and that our initiative can afford to run indefinitely. And last, but probably most importantly, future maintenance. We're an all-volunteer team. It's not a mystery. The stewardship of the project is going to shift over time. Francesca and I are confident that when we pass the torch to future volunteers, they're going to be able to own it, adapt it, and manage it as the project grows. And now I will pass it back to Maria and Stephanie.
Thank you. Yeah, so as you guys can see, we are hugely indebted to 8Polite, who, as I said before, have been consummate partners in a few different areas. One, they've built us a world-class tool and have donated world-class talent, as you've seen through Francesca and Monica, and also Doug, our project manager. But two, they're really instrumental in internalizing the values of a volunteer-run team to build something that is useful for us in particular, and being kind of one step ahead of us and always thinking through how can we hand this off, and always having sustainability in mind. And then to their credit, and also our graphic designers and UX UI designers from my collaborative, being really thoughtful about how do we create an experience of wellness, of a place that health workers will want to go to take care of themselves, to feel safe and secure and supported. So we're really grateful for the project that, for the product that they're building, and it's been a delight to see it come along. So, the good news is we've got a great team, we've got wonderful partners, we've got a pretty amazing tool. So let's zoom out and think about, why does this actually matter? And in these instances, I think it's most useful to hear from the practitioners themselves. So I'll turn it over to Stephanie, who put it in her own words, sort of why this matters.
So over the emerging course of the pandemic, there have been a lot of efforts to collect data of all varieties. Testing data, mobility data, seroprevalence data, but nothing else we've seen is focused on our health workers. So that's our primary mission. And we're not just collecting these data and hoarding them away. Our main objective is to use our data to advocate for evidence-based solutions to protect our health workers who are putting themselves at risk for the greater good. I see every day in my work that we need this information. We've got evidence-based models for using ventilators, we've got evidence-based models for the number of ICU beds we have available, but no evidence-based models for our health workers, and we've got to get there. Reducing the level of risk for our health workers is crucial. We need to make sure we're doing our utmost to provide a safe workplace and protect both the labor and general human rights of our health workers. Their very lives depend on it.
Yeah, so as you can see, we have a big task ahead of us, and luckily I think that we are up to the challenge. But sort of in closing thoughts, the reason that this matters most is that, as a reminder, this gives us rapid visibility into health patterns. Importantly, it helps solve the black box of data. That which is measured is improved, and if we understand what is happening in other metropolitan areas that might be similar to us on specific characteristics, we can learn, we can improve, and we could change policies that could in turn save lives. Second, this provides a safe method for both individual participants and institutions to have a place where they can go, share their information, and understand that it will be kept confidential and aggregated and then shared back. Third thing is that all of this data, as we sort of spoke to a moment ago, can be shared to build best practices. We know that we're starting to reopen, but we know that COVID is going to be around for a while, and we don't know what the future holds. So for this pandemic, as we start to face different kind of changes as it plays out in different geographic areas, how can we learn from what's happened in the past, and how can we share that out with different areas as they kind of prepare to face this battle, going into the future? And then last but not least, we know that this might not be the first challenge of this kind that the last challenge of this kind that we're ever going to face. So collecting this data and having a record of the human experiences of all the health workers on the front lines can help us to get better for the future, to learn from the next challenge that we face. So that's our talk, that's our product. I'm so glad that you guys could be here to hear from our amazing team. What we need now is really participation and help from you guys. So the survey is live, the web app is full steam ahead. What we need is continued user ramp. So you can find us at healthworkerdata.org/survey if you're a health worker, healthworkerdata.org/survey to take the survey. And we encourage all of you to get in touch with us at the email provided on the screen, or share the survey with every health worker you know, as this is a tool that is built by and for them. So that's our talk, and we are so grateful that you guys could come out and share an hour of your day with us today. Thank you, guys.